This is the Constructionist Podcast, where we take ancient stories, the person of Jesus, current events and topics, and help you construct a new Christian worldview that's relevant and loving to those around you. I'm your host, Kevin Bates. I'm a semiotician and community builder looking at the signs of the times to build a better future together. You are tuned into the Constructionist Podcast, and tonight we are continuing our series on cults. So here at the Constructionist, we encourage a worldview that is built on the principles of Christ. And in this episode, we are examining the occult, not to be confused with cults. This is the occult, which we'll define here in a minute. So we're doing this through a clear and honest lens. So next week, we're continuing our series with a more traditional cult and modern day cults. And by doing so and doing a series like this, we hope to offer insights and perspectives that will help you in your journey towards a greater understanding with love and compassion for yourself and for other people. We want to assure you that in tonight's episode, we've researched, we're not fabricating anything. And so these are information, and this is information and ideas that we've come up with to present to you. If we're going to make a guess, we're going to tell you we're guessing. If we're going to do some research or we're offering research, we're going to tell you where to get it and look it up yourself. So our goal is to provide an honest and authentic perspective in our examination. So this is our thinking space. We're presenting ideas and thoughts, and tonight we are making our best attempt to explain very practical thoughts on the occult. So if you enjoy the Constructionist Podcast and want to support us financially, please follow the link in the chat or the show notes on the social media platform that you are listening to, and visit our give page at resonatelife.org. Your support will enable us to continue producing high quality content like this. We desire to hear from you. We want to engage with you, and that's more important to us. So we believe that through our interactions and discussions with listeners like you, we can continue to learn and grow together. And with your valued feedback and questions and ideas, we're excited to build a community around a shared exploration called a communal hermeneutic. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us and let us know what you think. So tonight is the occult. We're going to define that. Thank you, Sharia. Thank you, Jake, for joining. And I think first, what I'd like to do, Sharia, is to go to your definition of cults. This is going to get a little confusing tonight, I think, because we have the occult, O-C-C-U-L-T, the occult, and our general series is called The Cults. So if you say the occult, or you say a cult, kind of sounds the same. So you're going to define a cult.
A cult?
Okay.
Oh, cult.
A
Not
cult.
occult. Yes. Please define a cult for us tonight.
All right. So the dictionary definition is a system of religion that's like organized around a central deity or object, a system of worship. The definition we've been working with in this series to talk about its more pejorative use is a religious system that's characterized by high control and often centered around a charismatic or narcissistic leader.
So our definition of cults has taken us to talking about specific cults, but also talking about cult philosophy. We do think that you can have a cult philosophy where, like Christian nationalism or any kind of nationalism, can move into cultish type philosophy. You can get into some politics and such that has cult philosophy behind it. And when those form into communities, into groups, some ideologues, some ideology comes together and starts circling around a central leader, that's when it's formally considered a cult. Now, all religions, like Sharia said, would be definitely have a cult-like system of behaviors or the practices and such. And if Christianity essentially centers around one person, Jesus, then you would say that all religions, really, including Christianity, is a cult. Yet, in a modern, more like Sharia said, a definition that is more practical, that what people would deem more like a modern day idea of cult is that leader then is controlling, narcissistic, and a power monger and such. So this is where in politics you can actually move into cult like behavior when you're centering around a central leader that is narcissistic and controlling and domineering. But the occult, so I thought, it would be great to talk about the occult on this day, October 26th, just a few days before Jake's birthday. No, just kidding. Or Kevin and Sharea's birthday.
Our birthday.
Yeah, but really right before Halloween, where
happy birthday to us.
Yeah, happy birthday in the month of October to many of us, it seems like. But the occult, where this is the witches, the warlocks, the druids, the magic, the
psychics,
the tarot card readers,
yep.
on and on and on. So this is the occult, and we do have a different definition, which not to be confused with cult, because really the occult is not formally cult.
No.
Right. It's not formally a cult. It is the occult, which is defined as esoteric religion or esoteric practices of the supernatural, of beliefs, of practicalities in general that fall outside of anything organized. So what really defines first the occult is it's not organized. It's not some organized religious faction, group, community. Now, I think that you can take occult practices and turn that into a cult. Yes, definitely.
A traditional, let's say a traditional cult. Like
you can turn that into a traditional cult. Yeah. So I would say that let's just pick on some idea like ayahuasca treatments, these herbs that you take, or really medicinal type drink that you take, and you can steam bath with it, or you can drink it straight, and you literally have a physical reaction where sometimes that includes projectile vomiting, and then all of a sudden going into a hallucinogenic state. And then in that hallucinogenic state, the shaman, the mentor, the person that's overseeing you in this ayahuasca treatment, then walks you through some traumas, walks you through something. Some people find value in it, and some people find true healing in ayahuasca treatments. Yet there are groups that you can go to, spa treatments, and maybe in Florida or in the Keys or whatever, and you can spend time with ayahuasca communities where they turn it into almost like a controlling spiritual practice. So that's where some things that are seen as like the witch's brew, where we're drinking the witch's brew, the ayahuasca drink, let's just connect those two together for tonight's sake, that it turns into, with a community of people, a cult type feel. But the practice of something, a spiritual practice of something, doesn't necessarily make something cultish, or cult. You have to have a group of people. You have to have a leader in that. So these are the things. The occult falls outside of organized religion. So
can I butt in real fast, Kevin?
Yeah, please.
A cult, by definition, is, you said esoteric, and a good word.
The occult, yeah.
The occult is, or occult practices is esoteric, which is a hiddenness or a secretiveness.
Yeah.
I think maybe a little closer that we see around us a lot. Like the Freemason Society would be an occultic practice. Because it's secret, it's hidden, there's rites and rituals that are behind closed doors, they're governed by a text. So it's very occultic, if you think about the true definition of a cult. So like these secret societies that are out there that are hidden, or you have no access into. I think that's that's probably the biggest difference between an organized religion that's accepted, like Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, is that you can go, Islam, is that you can go and observe their practices and they're not hidden or secret. But the occult on the other side is a hidden or secret, and so it's hard to engage with those times or beings.
So what we're going to talk about tonight a little bit to piggyback on what Jake just said. We might pick on a few groups, because there are groups that you're not allowed in. You can't see behind the curtain. You got to dress in a funny hat and funny clothes to get in there. There's some, I would say, let's just call it weird, because it is weird. I think walking in with funny hats and doing funny handshakes is weird.
Like Christian priests?
Right. But you know what? It doesn't necessarily. So here's the thing. Something that really Sharia was pushing me just really hard on the other day when we were doing our pre-work is occult practices necessarily bad? See, that's the thing, is we need to unpack occult practices. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they helpful? Are they harmless? What are they? And why do we have views of them that we do? Like, why do we view witches as bad? Why in the Old Testament does it say that sorceress says the sorceress female is to be killed? What happened to the sorcerer? I mean, Simon the sorcerer survived that, but we don't see too many female sorceress says, or however you pronounce it. So we're going to unpack that a little bit tonight. But we really have to unpack, okay, where do we get these views from? Like the witch's brew. Does that just come from Disney? Or where does that come from? Like the Salem witch trials. Why did those even occur? Where did the witch trials come from? Going back farther and farther and farther in history, there's a lot of viewpoints, or at least movement against the occult that's bad, or it's to declare it bad. But then, I can't remember the year, but we have the emergence of a book series and a movie series that's playing off of the book series called Harry Potter, where Christians, traditional Christianity, attacked these books. Anything that had to do with magic or the other side, kind of even the underworld or the overworld or the behind the curtain world, or let's stop at this, train stop and get into that other world. So even the other world stuff is seen as bad. Well, why is it
1998?
1998.
It's old.
Why was that considered bad? And the movement, well, it really isn't bad. Well, why isn't it bad? I think we're going to answer some of that tonight. So let's start with a little more definition, because the occult includes so much. And that's the problem with this category, is the occult just kind of is a wholesale basket of any type of phenomenon, like any other type, otherworldly or other thing that goes outside of organized religion or scientific explanation. And so the problem when you say that, though, I would say is, okay, so you're going to tell me that wands and flying on sticks, right, is weird, and is evil, right? But we're going to say that, taking bread and juice in a weekly ritual, and calling it the body and the blood of Christ, and practicing that every week, and either pretending like it is the body and the blood of Christ, memorializing the body and the blood of Christ, or actually believing it's the body and the blood of Christ, transubstantiated, consubstantiated, or memorialized communion, that's not weird. We're going to say that's not weird, but wands and sticks are weird. I think we need to unpack that a little bit, because I don't think that that's a fair shake at the wands and sticks to say that that's just weird. So Shreya taught me a lot about, hey, wait a minute, Kevin, stop the bus, because you can't just throw everything in the evil category that you don't understand or doesn't have an explanation. And I think that that's most of it, is it doesn't have an explanation. So let's just throw it in this wholesale basket. Okay, it's not organized religion, it's not science. So let's just make this all-encompassing category and call it the occult, and then deem it evil. So it's otherworldly agency. That's what the occult actually is categorized. It's a big category of the occult. That includes magic, that includes mysticism, that includes like casting spells and tarot card reading and clairvoyance. But there's also other categories like ESP. That was the big thing, extrasensory perception. I see dead people. So the idea that you have this like extrasensory clairvoyance or a parapsychology of, you can hear voices, or you can hear the other side or the underworld. So I think that term occult, basically, that's how that the categories of the occult. But there was an evolution of the occult, where I would say that Christianity was thought as probably the magic spells and the witch's brew to start. I mean, I'm sure that Jews and Greeks thought that, Christians were like, what are you brewing up in that little ritual you got called the Eucharist?
I think that they were considered cannibals.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that
which is weird.
Which is weird. But I don't think that like using blood in the middle of worship, metaphorical for Christianity, but in most animist and like Judaism, the blood is a central part of worships, like sacrifice of animals in Judaism. Or I was in
but I think that's not what yes, I totally agree. We're talking about a sacrifice of a person and drinking people's blood. That has always gone into, I mean, even the learned Greeks, you'd have to go back to what, Assyrians, Babylonians, when they would throw the babies in the sacrifice in the hot pan.
Yeah.
You would have to go back to some of that thinking.
Animist style, yeah. And then even into Incan and Aztecian religions as well.
Right. Right. And more recent history.
It's those
so
primal.
That's right. I think that's just like the introduction. That's this all-encompassing idea. But occult practices also include things like astrology. It also includes things like natural phenomenon would be considered, I guess, occult. Any kind of spiritualism is the occult. Of course,
call it like a pseudoscience. Would you say like anything that's a pseudoscience would be occultic?
Yeah. I'm sorry, pseudo-natural science. Like, you take these herbs, or you take this set of herbs, and it gives you a bigger spiritual reality. You can tap into other things if you take magic mushrooms or whatever, LSD trips and such, even drugs that we're more familiar with. But New Age, there for a while, that New Age philosophy was considered, and would be still considered, the occult. But what is New Age anyway? That seems just like a modern term to throw any, urban type Hinduism, Buddhism, spirituality into a wholesale bucket too, and call it the New Age. So I think that it's very loosely defined, and it's very harshly judged. Mm-hmm. And I'll end with this in the introduction. It's harshly judged because mostly we just don't understand and won't take the time to understand the history of it, where it came from, and whether it's good or bad.
Well, and if you're looking from a Christian lens, it's really easy to anything that's outside of Christianity to call a cult, or
the occult.
And then
either way, it's bad.
the quick transition to, well, this is Satan, and so obviously this is part of the occult now. So
Right.
there's no bifurcation of cult versus occult versus Satanism versus anything. That it's
Well, anything outside of Christianity is a spawn of Satan. So yeah. So even like traditional religions would be Satanism to a very traditional Christian. Trey is laughing, but I really did deal with like people and people groups that just
No, I know. It
categorize
was just, you said it so authoritatively. I was like,
what
oh, we're going to have to back up a little bit here.
authoritatively with what? What do you mean?
that everything outside
That everything
of
outside Christianity is of the devil.
Well, I've had people say that to me. That,
Well, like
that
even-
traditional Christianity actually would say
Yeah.
that.
Well, card playing would be the occult. Dancing would be the occult.
Yeah. Yeah, that was definitely satanic. Dungeons and Dragons, when I was a kid, I don't care if you were Christian or not, Dungeons and Dragons was the occult, and that was from Satan. Even if you weren't a Christian, that was from Satan. I guess what the story that I have is I had a secretary once in the church, and she was a wonderful person, and I'm not dissing on her whatsoever, but she had a very traditional form of Christianity, and she was very spiritually sensitive. She called herself spiritually sensitive, and I think that she was
not clairvoyant, but spiritually sensitive.
No, that's a Christian way of saying parapsychology. So
Yes.
so she was very sensitive to the spirit, she would say. And she prayed hard, and she prayed up and down those hallways and prayed. She was my prayer person. And I was just talking theology with her. And I said, there's some groups that believe that, and we're talking about baptism. And it's just the theology of baptism. So it's just a subject matter in Christianity that's been argued for a very long time.
Too much.
And too much. And where the baptism is necessary, not necessary, essential, not essential for salvation. And so I was just like presenting like the idea to her that we that there are different views on baptism. And I said there's some that believe that baptism is not essential for salvation, but there are people in Christianity that believe that baptism is essential and necessary for salvation. And she just blurted out, like yelled at me that it was witchcraft. She's like, that's just witchcraft. And I just was like, witchcraft? I've never heard anybody say like that's like saying that all Calvinists are witchcraft or
It's kind of true.
Well, or an Arminianist, to be fair, they're witchcraft.
Sure.
So it's really like, it was really strong. But now that we've studied the occult, I kind of have an understanding of why she would say that it's just this wholesale bucket that we throw everything in that we don't understand. So let's try to understand it the very best that we can understand. So in our first block tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about, if I can open up my notes here, we're going to talk a little bit about magic. And yes, and the idea of magic and the morality and the history of magic. So Jake, kind of take this, lead it a little bit. Shrey and Jake, you guys lead this a little bit and just talk openly about magic, because you're more familiar, I think, with this and more modern in your childhood and your modern childhood history.
Let's see. I was 10 when Harry Potter came out in 98.
Yeah.
So, but we were of the group that there was a boycott of Harry Potter, right? We weren't allowed to read it. It was, I don't think my parents for that. I wasn't really reading those books anyways. And so I don't think it was all out, you can't read it. But a lot of people around us, whereas you cannot read this text because it creates thin spaces inside of you that Satan can enter into your heart.
Okay, so back up. Explain thin spaces.
We'll just leave that there.
No. We got to camp on that.
Can I offer a parallel to that?
Go ahead.
Because that's also the way I've heard meditation explained by conservative Christians, that if you empty your mind, then there's room for Satan to get in there.
Well, meditation
it's kind
is
of the same idea. as a thin space.
Yeah. So thin spaces is when.
Well, meditation, not to correct you, Jake, but meditation is a religious practice. It's a formed religious practice
I'm not.
from
I'm being.
Buddhism.
I'm being facetious of
Oh,
like what
okay.
people think
Okay.
of
Thin spaces.
the. Yeah. So
So
meditation.
a thin space is we're doing things, participating in things that we're just standing on that edge of the thin space.
Think of it as thin ice, right? So the
Okay.
more you venture out into the middle of the lake, the thinner the ice becomes.
Well, and I know some people that won't even visit, read, participate, of course, in anything but a traditional worship service or traditional
Yeah.
religious practice, because they believe that the devil might get inside of them.
Yeah. So think about if you venture out too far, you'll get stuck. You'll fall through. You won't be able to go to the other side. And so like meditation and emptying yourself becomes that thin space where in Christianity that they say you're supposed to actually fill yourself with these things, but other religions is the emptying of self, which there's no validity in that claim. I think that's bunk. But the idea is that the further you venture out from traditional Christianity, the more easy it is to slip through the ice and to fall.
I think thin space is a term that has been used. I think it comes from Ireland. I'm not positive. But like Halloween, for example, or All Hallows Eve was considered a thin space. When the veil between the worlds is thinner.
Most thin.
And so there's more contact with the dead.
Yeah, and in Coco, it describes thin spaces as well. And
then the Day of the Dead, it's the Day of the Dead, right?
Is the thinnest, and so that's when they're able to enter in back into the earth and visit their ofrenda.
I really kind of like thin spaces.
Thin spaces are nice, and so thin spaces also have to do like with planets aligning as well. So when the planets are closest together, then something spiritual is going to happen, right? And so it becomes that thin space again. And so like there's all these moments in time. Thin spaces are like the longest day of the year, the shortest day of the year. You know, we have Christian holidays that cover up the solstice and what's the other word? Besides solstice?
The equinox.
Equinox times.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know where you're going.
So we have Christian practices that cover up these thin space ideas. But we have a theology of thin space as well, where Jesus is the ultimate thin space, right? It's there's no thinner space than that. So back to magic. Sorry, I think it's a misunderstanding, but also a reality that people believe in spells, casting spells, wanting them to be true.
Good, bad omens.
Good and bad omens, or speaking into things, right? Speaking over things.
And a lot of that it's about intention and setting one's intentions, which is a thing that you do if you are trying to reach a goal, or maybe it's a part of your Christian spiritual practice. Like setting intentions is a pretty universal practice. But it's also a big part of magic.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, there was a famous gentleman that wrote an uber famous book called Purpose Something Life. And
the purpose-driven life.
So that right there is an intention, like you're setting an intention with your purpose. So the idea of setting intention, like when a yoga teacher stands in front or sits in front of a class and says, let's set an intention with our practice. There's absolutely nothing wrong with setting an intention with a practice. We do it in Christianity. If you go to a liturgical church, more liturgical, you know, they're calling worship together with an intention. There's themes to our worship practice. So setting intention is not a bad thing.
Spell casting is just speaking out over something, be it positive.
Well, let's go back to the definition of magic, though, because magic is the manipulation through tools, through devices, through like ingredients, right? So
Mhm.
through like a mechanism, you're manipulating the supernatural to manifest itself in the natural somehow, where you're taking something that's otherworldly and you're bringing it into the world. And the intention of that can be good, nebulous, like no consequence, or bad. So they call that white magic, gray magic, black magic. And honestly, like in my research on this, there was absolutely no consensus on what is white, gray, especially gray, and what is dark magic or black magic. So when you are taking something magic, a device, ingredients, or tools of some kind to manipulate the supernatural to manifest itself in the natural for good self-help, other help intentions, then that would be a white magic. Gray means it has no consequence, or there's just no, it's just something that you're trying to do that has no consequence. And then dark would be for bad intention. So if you're trying to do harm to another person or take revenge on another person, that would be like dark magic.
Yeah.
Right. But magic in and of itself in the first century of the church actually was connected to some kind of demonic force. And so early on in Christianity, demons and magic got connected. And so you have to, in order to like call all magic bad or it's all evil or it's all witchcraft, whatever that what you are yelling out about the occult, as a Christian, you have to have a traditional form of Satan, a view of Satan, in order to believe certain things about magic. So if you are connecting Satan and demons to magic manipulative practices to manifest the supernatural into the natural, you actually have to have some form of traditional Satan theology that backs that. Otherwise, it's like, well, what are you manipulating? If you don't believe in demons, then what are you manipulating? Or if you don't believe in Satan, what are you manipulating into the natural world?
I think yes, and there can be good magic. And I'll go back to like the story of Jesus. Let's go back right there at he's visited by three magi, three sorcerers, three magicians.
Right.
And so
and they bring go ahead.
They bring gifts that foreshadow death.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's these tools and mechanisms that they have. And so it's they're out looking for, they have done their magic back home and they're actually looking for Jesus. So I mean, it's hard through scripture to really say that magic is good or bad. I think it just is, and it's what people engage with. Yeah. It's just using tools. It's the Greek word techne, which is the use of tools.
I think that much maybe of our belief about magic probably emerged, and especially our modern view of magic and what we believe about like a witch in a pointy hat with a stew, the witch's stew, or Merlin the magician, or something like that. It came
Merlin
from
was a good guy, remember?
Right. And expensive. White magic, to perform white magic back in the day, like if you wanted to hire somebody to perform magic in your life, that was cash. And so if you wanted somebody to come to your house and cast a good spell, that was a lot of money because they brought some very expensive things. So I'm wondering, like these magicians or these sorcerers that ended up in Jesus's around the time of Jesus being on earth here, That was cash that they laid down for Jesus. And I'm wondering, like they had those things. They had those things in their possession, and they brought those things to Jesus. So they used those things in other venues and for other purposes. And so people called upon them for something, whatever it was. They called upon these people to perform different things in their life. So white magic, and dark magic, black magic is cheap. So we now in our modern like view is that's the frog legs. We're gonna put some frog legs in the stew, and we're gonna put some guts in the stew. That's all cheap. It didn't have any cash behind it. So it just was a recipe for dark magic. But Shrey, I want you to talk, because this is where we cross the line here of, okay, so in the Bible, we have these positively viewed sorcerers that show up at the baby Jesus. We have positive views of sorcerers, but now, in the Salem, Massachusetts area, now we're, burning them at this, witches, females at the stake. And like every Disney movie you see, there's witches that have cackling laughs and literally are using cheap products for black magic. So why is she have this pointy nose and this pocked out face with pointy hat, and she's being burned at the stake, but Simon the sorcerer all the way advancing up to Merlin the magician, why are they seen as like heroes?
Well, I mean, Simon the Sorcerer is not seen as a hero.
Well, okay, yeah. But he's not.
Yeah, Saul wasn't supposed to go there.
But there was a. But
there's the verse in Exodus that says, "Kill the female sorcerer."
Yeah,
but there's nothing about the male one. Yeah.
Let's go back. We'll go back to the whole sorcerer thing. I think you're talking about like why have we really demoralized and
made witches to be ugly and gross and mean?
Yeah, like what is a better view of what a witch is?
Well, honestly, I think that it's just bottom line misogynistic and hating on females again. So when you look in history how females were treated and thought to be witches, there's a whole history of why they even thought they were witches.
Go for it, Trey.
So after the Middle Ages, Europe is moving out of serfdom, and something called the enclosures took place. So it used to be land was public. It was held in common. So everyday people could go forage for berries out on the land. They could use wood from the trees to make houses. They could graze their sheep. And during the enclosures, it was basically a land grab to make land private property. And when you do that, now all of these common people don't have access to that livelihood through the land. And so you end up losing a huge chunk of essentially social services. The demographic that is hit hardest by this are middle-aged to elderly women who don't have family to fall back on. And so these are the people who would have fought back the hardest.
The gleaners.
Yeah. Would have fought back the hardest against this system because they were getting left behind. And so maybe they did get a little bit angry and bitter, but for good reason. These are also the people who would traditionally carry a lot of the healing knowledge, like using plants for making medicines. And so it was very easy to pin that sort of practice as just label it witchcraft. And now we've got the church involved and we can go kill the women and take the land.
So instead of herbs and medicine, now we just cut them, bleed them, and put leeches on their body because that's better.
Right.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
and we know that who controlled herbs, and especially healing herbs, was the church.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
that is why Luther created beer with hops,
yeah,
right?
Mm-hmm.
like you were saying, Kevin, the dropping frogs' legs and stuff into the pot, right?
Right.
That's it's code. So things like Eye of Newt or whatever, it's code for plants that would resemble that in some way. And so people who knew their plants knew the code and
Mm.
were able to make the medicines, but people who didn't know the code couldn't. It was a way of protecting the knowledge.
Mm.
If you want to look at sorcerer and why, especially, and I think sorcery falls at this time more on females because they were more the herbalists.
Mm-hmm.
But Simon the sorcerer, I think in the New Testament where they're dealing with him, if you go to the original language of what sorcery is, it's pharmaca or pharmacology, and so a sorcerer would just be a pharmacist of sorts. And I think the sin of Simon the sorcerer was more that he was producing drugs that people were getting high off of and was poisoning them than Simon was using drugs to heal people. And I think that's the issue in the Simon text. It's not that he was using magic or he was doing all this weird stuff. Is that he was taking from society in a way.
Mm. So in taking away from society by using methods that possibly, couldn't be taxed or couldn't be charged for by the state or something like that. That's happened in history all along. That's what Martin Luther got in trouble for, basically.
Well, you talk about like ayahuasca or peyote
Right.
or
Right.
even pot, right? The idea
Right.
is that this high experience that puts you into a different state of mind.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so that is why I think that those things are so demonized. But the idea of Simon the sorcerer was he was poisoning people on purpose.
Right. Right. So there is a symbol of magic that and I hope I get this right because I'm not a expert on Satanism or the symbols of Satanism or divination or magic. And so there's different symbols, within different groups or different philosophies of the occult. And there's mystical traditions that are traditions, but then there's also like just practices, and what it seems to me is there is a continual conversation about balance, that you have the supernatural and the natural that need to be balanced. You have good and evil that needs balance. You have demons and angels that need balance. So there's like this idea of balance. And when things get out of balance, then I, am like the diviner. I'm the one that like is the magic performer that's going to bring life back into balance by casting good and bad spells on people. And the symbol for this balance is the goat's head. And that's the goat's head that you see. Halloween, it's going to come out. It's a really creepy head. It's really
Of all
on
heads, the goat is the creepiest of
it's
all.
on the level. It's on the level of
especially decapitated or on a male.
It's really scary. It's a scary head, and it's Baphomet, which is the name of the head, and supposedly worshipped by the Knights of Templar. So
Knights of
basically,
Templar.
Yeah. So you'll see this head like way back in like the 1300s, but then advancing forward in modern time, you'll see it in the 19th century. Take like a
Occultism. Yeah.
lot of root in cult demon deity demon balance. And so the full depiction of the goat is actually the goat's head on a human body. It's not just the goat's head. So that's why people wear the goat's head on the human body. And so it's more of a I don't know how to describe it, like a balance between, I guess, the natural and the supernatural. um Depictions of evil animals. uh I've read some things as far as when the Europeans came and colonized and took over basically Native American indigenous land, that they deemed all of their practices uh, demonic and magic. And so they became everything that Native Americans practiced in their history, whether it be a practice of herbal use, whether it be a practice of dance, whether it be a practice of what they wore, what they put on their face, even the markings on their face, uh, tattooed markings or scarrings of some kind. All of that became like magic. It was demonic. And so the appropriation into some of the occult practices, since that's demonic, we'll use it. So you'll see some things in like practices, the occult practice that seems more Native American to me than like some weird demonic practice.
Well,
And
I
so the
mean,
Europeans in their
people would
conquest,
think that sweat huts and peyote would be demonic.
demonic, right? All of those kinds of things, even though they do express more of a probably a natural magic, what we would consider nature's magic. um how in the world does herbs heal us, right? That's kind of natural magic.
Well,
So
I mean, we still
The same
use
way food
herbs
does.
in
right, I
in the
know, it's
same
just
way
like
that like real medicine does our real medicine,
Yeah.
but pills.
right, or like some kind of performance or something to call rain for the growth of the land, for
Yeah.
the product that needed to be harvested, or what have you. The range of practices that early Christians deemed demonic, and since everything outside of traditional religious Christianity, of course, was witchcraft, then some of these things begin to disperse out into other groups and practices as well. Kind of a sad reality, to me, that I look at that and go, wow, we just kind of appropriated very sacred, spiritual, ancient practices and adopted them into like demonic realm. We've done that all along the way, whether that be with a goat's head or whether that be with much of what we're talking about is magic has appropriated a lot of things in history. That was a lot.
There's a lot there. We could
That
talk
was a
about
lot.
one more little symbol that we all know
Yeah.
really well that has occultic ties, especially with the idea of healing. Um, the the symbol of physicians
Oh yeah.
is the staff and the two snakes, and I think Christians have this idea that it's Moses' staff when Moses rose it up, the snake
Right.
on it that everyone's healed. That's not
Not
what
it.
that is. That
No.
is the staff of Hermes,
Hmm.
and the snake or the snakes on it represent the venom and the oil that doctors would pull off of snakes and feed to alien patients. And so that's where the idea of selling snake oil comes from.
Mm.
Um, so like even we have these symbols of animism. I'll say animism. I think animism is a little better definition of what we're using for a cult right now. Um, because it's just the primal practices of any given area before they meet Christianity. And so,
Say that one more time. Say that one more time.
Animism, I think, is a better definition of what we're talking about right now, because those are primal religious structures and rituals before they meet Christianity.
Okay.
Traveling around, like in Thailand, they have animist houses, especially in the north, outside their homes, and they have little figurines of people in them, and they have blessings to them, and it's basically ancestor worship almost.
Right.
In Latin America, you have the ofrenda, where it's those that are passed are set up on an altar, and then once a year they get a visit as long as they're remembered. We all know that song, right?
Well, in northern Thailand, they're animists. The Karen tribes are animists, and so they have animist houses outside of all of their teakwood homes, and that's been the challenge of evangelism in some of those kind of communal tribe people, because Jesus just seems like another person symbol.
Evangelism's easy.
Put along the lineup of all of the others, and
and then you go into like in Sulawesi, when I was there, it was sacrificing a bull or many bulls for the crossing into death, and this was a Christian tribe.
Yeah.
And so you had these practices that predate Christianity, predate even like, then you have evangelists coming, but even talking about gospel, like the good news, all that is the God spell. It's the speaking of goodness of God over everybody. And so maybe we're all magicians.
Let's talk about psychics. This is ESP.
He didn't like that one very much.
Extrasensory perception. This is the sixth sense, the paranormal. I see dead people, the projections, the psychic abilities. I've met people that believe that they are psychics, that they can basically hear, talk to, although I would say that moves into parapsychology, but people believe that they can see future, that they can sense people around you, that they can sense the sixth sense of spiritual activity, the ESP, the extrasensory perception. You made a joke about being spiritually sensitive. Christians believe that they're spiritually sensitive. I am having a hard time differentiating in my deconstruction when we say Christian cliche type things like I'm spiritually sensitive, I'm listening to God, I'm like sensitive to the Holy Spirit speaking to me. It's really hard to differentiate that, and I'm not kidding. I'm not just joking. It's hard for me to differentiate this. What is the Holy Spirit? The difference between that and ESP, the traditional form of ESP. But where does intuition fit into this? Like my gut is telling me, I'm not going to do this. Or is that grandma speaking to me from the other side? Hopefully the overworld, speaking to me from the other side. Or, I got this little, ghost in my house that's telling me not to do it.
Let's try to take a step a little more simplistic. Okay. What's the difference between a psychic and a prophet?
Psychics are always seen as like bad people according to Christianity.
And is it just because they
cost a lot of money to tell you a bunch of malarkey,
Malarkey.
I don't know. That's an old term.
But what truly is the difference between a psychic or a prophet?
I mean,
I think I sort of have one, but it's iffy. The prophets, at least as we see them in the Bible, are often talking to a whole nation. Not always, though. Whereas our
So that just broke
popular
down in one
view of
statement.
psychics is like one-on-one fortune telling.
Okay, so let's take it back. So when Paul writes that some of you will be psychics, some of you will be psychics, some will be prophets, some teachers, some evangelists. So what is
Mm-hmm.
that's not speaking to the entire nation.
Sure.
So in that case, I understand what you're saying between type 1 prophet, right? Speaking to the nation, giving a message, and then giving hope. That's how we know if it's a true or false prophet, is the hope message. But what's the difference in Paul's day between a psychic and a prophet?
Don't know. This is where I break down with it. That's my problem. That's the problem that I just shared. It's like, okay, I'm having a problem with differentiating a traditional, I'm not talking about, when you're walking up and down, Venice Beach, California, and or stop by some little, garage type storefront and you pay, $100 for somebody to tell you stuff you already know. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about somebody, that's on Oprah that actually is seen as like a real, that has documented historical documentation of the things that they have predicted have come true, or they're actually reading somebody's aura or something. I don't know the difference, to be honest.
Well, I mean,
I'm fairly comfortable with there not being one.
I mean, I think it has to do with where their message is given.
Okay.
But I believe that people can be spiritually sensitive inside and outside the church. And so when we have this view that people are not able to access the spirit outside of Christianity, I think that's completely wrong. And in the Bible, we have a tradition of even high priests being outside the tradition of Judaism. And so prophet and priest stretches beyond one religion.
So let's get specific. Astral projections. So we have I really want to talk about this stuff because this is the out-of-body experience. I'm having an out-of-body experience. It's people just use this terminology, or near-death experience. Shreya, do you believe that when, if you got close to death, what is your view? If you get close to death, the boy that sees heaven, and then a whole theology is built off of that, of course, right? But we get to the near-death. And do you actually believe that we can have an out-of-body experience? I saw the light and I came back to planet Earth. I mean, what is your view on that? Because I have certain specific views and I'm just going to nail it to the wall. So just know that before you answer.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for the warning. Hey, I'm comfortable with the world being a weirder place than I think it is. But also, I think brains probably do weird things when they don't have oxygen.
Thank you. Because that's where I was going. I think that there's a very large case, like the whole astral projection, having an out-of-body experience, or I died, had an out-of-body experience, and came back to life. Okay, that's on the ESP spectrum of things. That's in that category. I studied biology for a long time, and I wanted to be a biologist. I took a lot of human anatomy, physiology classes and such, and I do follow science still, and I do love science and just the practice of science. Science is not something to believe in; it's something to practice. It's not a faith principle. It's a method. It's a discipline that's built with theories. And so these topics go outside of like science, most of them. But I would say that the whole out of body near death experience actually has a scientific explanation. And so if I asked you, what do you think happens to you when you die? You probably say, oh, I, go to heaven, or I'll see you in hell, or whatever, your answer is. But the scientific explanation is at some point when and I've watched many people die, like being a pastor, you just watch people die. You're like the person that's standing there taking their last breath, during the death gargle, and they take their last breath, and then you just pray them into heaven, and there you go. But if you asked me that question, I would probably say, well, at some point your organs shut down, and your heart stops beating, and at some point after that, your brain actually, because of the way that your brain is, there's like a release of DMT. It's called dimethyltryptamine. Dimethyltryptamine is released, and at that point, like, your brain is rushed with, like, let's see, just say like almost like a dopamine response.
It's trying to save
And
itself. Yeah.
yeah, just basically just like in a state of like almost like psychedelic experience. So it's been tested and it's associated with psychedelic experience, like just pounding yourself with, like, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, just pounding yourself with, psychedelic type drugs. So that's what your brain does in death. So if you approach that, I could imagine seeing some light. I could imagine seeing some weird stuff, maybe even having a conversation with great grandma. You're just like having like this, literally this experience. And then if they can shock your heart back into place, back into, rhythm, I guess that would, in a sense. And so in that death experience, there's a biological, physiological, brain chemical experience that you are having. And if you did die,
Where are we at?
then all of that
What
that ends. So
Near
the
death
whole idea of
experiences.
astral
Okay.
projection,
Okay.
or out of body experience, or
Okay.
near death experience, really, I would say there's a lot of biology or science that can explain that. Yeah. There's also, there's another category, but we want to finish on, of course, something very positive and fun, is the Church of Satan.
Well, hold on, Kevin. I think
yeah.
what you're
Super fun.
saying, is a good point too. When we engage with things that now can be scientifically proven,
Yeah.
I think we just need to let things go and not try to force God back into that section, or spirituality back into that section, like near-death experiences and viewing God.
Right.
We've talked about Occam's razor in the past, but the simplest answer is probably the easiest answer, and the simplest answer that we have for like these views of heaven and weirdness is probably DMT. Like that is a newer biological explanation of what happens when you have near death experiences.
Right.
So that, and a lot, I think, with the occult is changing, because if something seemed nefarious or bad, we put Satan behind that, and if something seemed good, we put God behind that. But if now we can scientifically prove one or the other, then it's better.
Right. So, right. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay.
Let's I don't know if we're going to get to, I mean, we can, because it's Halloween, and we can talk till midnight, and people could just jump in and jump out of this conversation and like listen to it later.
Spookier at midnight anyway.
What'd you say?
Spookier at midnight anyway.
Totally. The paranormal. I had an experience with Jake, our co-host here, years ago that we owned coffee houses, and one of the coffee house, some of our staff would claim that there were ghosts in the house. There were things that, things would slam shut, or they would hear steps upstairs,
I've heard
and
things. Yeah.
yeah, like just like the paranormal was happening in our shops. And so we were just at the counter one day, and some guy walks up and says, "You know that this place is haunted, right?" And we're like, "What? Are you kidding me?"
Yes, we do.
And he's like, "Well," he's like, "Has your staff ever told you that, like, there's somebody living upstairs?" And we're like, "No." At first it was like, "No, number one, we don't want this kind of publicity, and number two, maybe we do and we can sell tickets." I didn't quite, know what to do with the subject matter. But he's like, "Well, I'm with, ghost
Oregon Ghost
hunters,
Hunter
and
Society. Yeah.
we can, our society here in Oregon in this chapter can, like, test your house and all this kind of stuff." So they brought in all this equipment. They brought in all of this, like, these light readers and sound readers, and they just basically adorned our building with cameras and sound equipment. And in the back room, it was like a NASA setup that we're sending somebody to the moon. All these computers and video screens and just crazy amount of recording equipment. We're all upstairs. Long story short, we're all upstairs, a group of about like 7 or 8 of us. And he's explaining the situation and why they think that this building is haunted, and Aunt Mary is walking around or whatever. And we're looking for this apparition. We're looking for this paranormal, like, whether or not this paranormal claim is real, right? So we are all upstairs, and all of a sudden, no one else is in the building besides the guy recording. And all of a sudden, we hear someone or something walk up the stairs. It was a wooden staircase, and it was creaky because it's an old building, 1906. So this thing walks upstairs. Now, if you can imagine just being little old us, right? And we're just there on the whim that this dude says that our house is haunted, but you actually hear something, and it flipped my lid. I was just, I'm done. I'm out of here. Especially when the guy jumps up and is literally calling the spirit forth to present itself to
And
us.
knock on the wall if you can hear us. It's like,
Knock
dear
on
God,
the wall.
if there's a knock,
And we were just like, I'm like, I'm done. I need to leave now. I literally walked, like, because it came upstairs. So of course I snuck down the stairs, like slid down the stairs. And I'm like, if something's on these stairs, man, I am out of here. And I walked outside, and what did I find outside? Every single person that was sitting around that table, except that guy that's calling forth the spirit, all of us were outside. We were done. Done. So he says, "Okay, I'm going to bring my report back in a couple of weeks. You'll see the videos. We can sit down and talk about, your paranormal activity in this building. Aunt Mary is walking around with a knife or whatever." And I said, "Okay, whatever." So he comes back a couple weeks later, and he's like, "I need to have a serious conversation with you about your building." So we sit down, and he has a serious conversation with me about the building, that we have level 5, whatever that means, level 5 paranormal activity at our building, that it's recorded and that they can see it on camera. So he shows me the video. We're watching this little USB drive of video. I still have the video, and things are like, here's lights, here's a car that passes by. You can see the light shadows and such on the window. You can see that this is a branch from a tree. This is the wind. You can see that, like little branches fluttering in the window. And then all of a sudden, someone actually walks in front of the camera. And that is what he couldn't explain.
And
is
pauses.
someone, a person looking thing, walked in front of the camera, and he couldn't explain it. I couldn't explain it. I just sat there and went, "Are you kidding me?" I was just so creeped out. by the whole thing. Do I believe in paranormal activity today because of that one experience? No, I don't. Do I believe that ghosts exist in a form of people, in shadow form, friendly form, white sheet form? No, I don't. Do I believe that you can be so charged in your brain about paranormal activity that you can manifest things like in your hearing, even in your sight, even to be recorded on video? I have no idea. I don't have an answer for that. Do I believe most of it is revolving around our own psychological manifestations? Sure, I believe that. But do I have an answer for the being that walked in front of the camera? No, I don't. Is there any thoughts on that story?
As being a participant in that night and the video watching, I don't know. I think there can. I think there is a supernatural realm that
Oh yeah, sure.
that we can engage with.
Okay.
That's what I got. And so I don't think that astral projections is a real thing, but I think
that's near death experience. That's the near death experience.
But having
paranormal is the activity of ghosts.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
But like having words or having wisdom that's not tacit or learned, I think that you can engage with the supernatural in that way.
Okay. So like a tacit knowledge.
But not tacit and not learned.
Okay, so presented in an otherworldly form.
Correct.
Aliens, ghosts, or what have you.
I mean, we pretty much have proof there's aliens now, right? So why not just have ghosts too?
Sherry, do you have any thoughts on paranormal activity?
I'm open to that being a thing.
Okay.
Why not?
I just think things are probably weirder than we know.
Okay. I just have a hard time because I'm so scientific based in my brain that it's definitely a fake science to me. You know, when you talk about paranormal science, that's pseudoscience to me. So I have a hard time wrapping my head around. I have a easier time believing that other life forms are on Earth, or excuse me, other life forms exist in our universe, not on Earth, outside of Earth. I have an easier time than that than like that there's shadow figures, you know, roaming around. But not to judge anybody that believes that like their grandfather visits them at night, you know, at their bedside.
I had a friend who could see shadow people.
I can see shadow people.
And their best explanation is like somebody had a burst of emotion and like left an imprint in space-time.
Wow. Okay.
Wow. That's something else.
Hey, let's talk about...
They'd see them for just a bit and then they'd be gone.
Let's quickly talk about the Church of Satan. Anton LaVey, Church of Satan's hero, mentor, founder, wrote the Satanic Bible. They have different tenets. They are a religious organization per se, and they have a religious, let's say, practice to them. They're much different than the Satanic Temple.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that the Satanic Church has no affiliation whatsoever to the Satanic Temple. So the Satanic Temple is more of a humanist organization that works on causes that have to do with civil rights, justice issues, freedom issues, personal autonomy type issues,
social justice,
yeah, social justice issues, than the Church of Satan. The Church of Satan is a form group. My experience with the Church of Satan is Diabolus Rex in Portland. He used to walk around with, he had subcutaneous horns underneath the skin, subcutaneous horns implanted in his head, and he would walk around Portland with his standard bulldog, great big black bulldog, just representing. He was one of the priests of the Satanic Church. They do have tenets of say. Trey, you want to read those tenets really quick?
The 9 satanic statements. Number 1, Satan
We
represents
believe.
indulgence instead of abstinence. Number 2, Satan represents vital existence instead of spiritual pipe dreams. Number 3, Satan represents undefiled wisdom instead of hypocritical self-deceit. 4, Satan represents kindness to those who deserve it instead of love wasted on ingrates.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Number 5, Satan represents vengeance instead of turning the other cheek. 6, Satan represents responsibility to the responsible instead of concern for psychic vampires.
What?
Number 7,
What was
Satan
that last one?
represents-
Read the last one again?
Number 6, Satan represents responsibility to the responsible instead of concern for psychic vampires.
What's a psychic vampire? This sucks your emotion out?
I would guess it's the same as an emotional vampire.
Yeah, okay.
You know, some people are exhausting to be
Just
around.
takes your life away from you. Okay.
Totally.
Yeah. Number 7, Satan represents man as just another animal, sometimes better, more often worse, than those that walk on all fours, who, because of his divine spiritual and intellectual development, has become the most vicious animal of all.
True.
8, Satan represents all of the so-called sins, as they all lead to physical, mental, or emotional gratification. And 9, Satan has been the best friend the church has ever had, as he has kept it in business all these years.
Well, I would say that more the Church of Satan sounds self-centered. It definitely is a self-actualization or self-centered organization,
humanist,
or a religion. I would say that Satan is more of a symbol versus a person in the Church of Satan. That the Church of Satan, like if you truly are the Church of Satan or part of the Church of Satan, you're not believing necessarily in a traditional Christian view of Satan.
Right.
You're just against the Christian view of Satan and God. That's what you're against.
Right. They actually in the Church of Satan call it I-theism, which is a I-based theistic I am God, basically.
Yeah.
And that you are your own God. And so Satan is not a person to them. But all of our views so it's very hard for a Christian, for some reason, to just look at the tenets, even to Google Church of Satan, and to actually read what they believe,
Right.
and actually like read what the Satanic Temple believes. And you'll hear it in the news. You'll hear it, from politicians or from media type people, that if the Church of Satan or the Satanic Temple rather shows up at events, there's an automatic like opinion or judgment on who they are, what they believe, and who they believe in.
But they play on that.
They just play on that.
It's all satire to them.
Because it's a word, Satan. So the first thing, I guess in conclusion to all of this is, as a Christian, I think that it's really, and if you're just looking through a Christian lens, an honest Christian lens, the first thing you have to do is decide on, when it comes to the occult, but also demons and spirits and all the rest that we've talked about, and magic and what you think of that. I think you have to just, first of all, come to a conclusion. What do you believe about the supernatural? Like, do you believe that there is a supernatural? As a Christian, a lot of us walk around as agnostic, that we don't believe in a supernatural. We just are going through the motions and the practices of Christianity. So do you believe that there is a supernatural? And if you do believe that there's a supernatural, what form does that take? And you're going to have to spend some time, I think, in, does that form take a traditional view of like Satan? Does that form take a traditional view of God in heaven? Does that form take a traditional view of the demonic or the angelic, the supernatural spirit world? So just coming to some conclusions about that, I think, is really kind of important for Christian people, an exercise to go through. So first, do you actually believe in the supernatural? And what form does that supernatural take? Then you can start coming to some conclusions. And I'm not telling you what to believe or how to believe and what form those beliefs need to take. I think we need to be very careful on, number one, where do these practices actually come from that we would consider the occult, and our viewpoints of those practices. So we just brought up one about like the demonization of women, that like we're herbalists, like is it not
Alchemy.
alchemy? Alchemy, yeah, like an alchemist. So do you
Apothecary is probably what you're looking for now.
apothecary person,
Yeah.
right? So an apothecary person all of a sudden being strung up and burned at the stake
Because they made tea.
because they made some kind of herbal tea. They fed somebody chamomile tea.
It was peppermint.
Yeah,
You need to calm down.
Right. It's like, here's some vitamin B, string her up. So it's just crazy, you know, that the way people, you know, acted and responded and reacted. I think because they didn't form a proper view of the supernatural. They didn't have a formed view of what the supernatural actually was and how it interacted with the world. So I think that's the third step, is what do you actually believe the supernatural, and how does it interact with the world? Does it interact with the world? How does it interact? And how close are you willing to stand into that thin space? I respect you if you just like are creeped out by Halloween and have to stay home. Sometimes I get creeped out at Halloween because I don't want to pass out candy to a bunch of people and I have to stay at home. But I don't get creeped out because people are dressed in costumes. I can't participate because it's a thin space. And you know, some kid in a ghost costume is going to cross over into my spirit, you know, and do battle inside of me, and I'm going to be possessed. I don't think demons and Jesus can really like live like in the same confines of my brain, or my heart. Let's just call it that. So I think you have to form a belief about how the supernatural interacts with the natural. I don't think there's anything wrong with Harry Potter. I don't think there's anything wrong with a story about magic. I don't think there's anything wrong with a game about magic. I think if you're trying to manipulate a spiritual world and actually call upon that spiritual world to change the natural, the supernatural to change the natural, what I believe is anything that you participate in, you better know what you're doing. Yeah. And you better have a formed view on what you're doing. Otherwise, it's just you're just participating and playing in a realm that really you're uninformed. And I think that that's what Christians do. We play in realms that we're uninformed. So we judge Harry Potter, we judge magic, we judge a witch, we judge a warlock, we judge white magic, dark magic, black magic. We have no idea what that even means. We have no idea where it comes from. We look at a practice from Native Americans and we deem it what? Evil? Just because it's something that we don't know, or it's something we're unfamiliar with. And that's historically what Christians have done. So, Sharia, to answer your question in the pre-work, do I believe now that all the occult is bad and evil? No. I don't think that there's much in the occult, actually. that is evil, because most of it is not even connected to evil. It's just connected to something I don't understand and can't explain. And that's okay to live in that space. So with that, thanks, Sharia. Thanks, Jake. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight.